Divorce papers hit the table while 85 people sang Happy Retirement. My name is Eugene Hollister, 62 years old, 38 years married, and my wife had just ambushed me in front of everyone I knew. Sandra grabbed the microphone. "Eugene, it's time." She said it like she was announcing a raffle winner. Then came the sound I'll never forget. My own son started clapping. Slow, deliberate. My daughter joined in. Then Sandra took a bow, an actual bow, while I stood there holding papers that said I was worth exactly $300,000. 85 guests. Dead silence. My coworkers, my neighbors, my family. All watching the man who never complained finally get what he deserved. They expected tears, begging, maybe a scene. Instead, I smiled. And what I said next made my wife's face go white. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. This is the story of how 38 years of silence became the most satisfying words I've ever spoken. 5:30 in the morning, 6 days a week, for 38 years. That was my life. My Timex expedition would beep in the darkness. Black coffee, no sugar. Then I'd grab my tool bag, 45 pounds of wire cutters, voltage testers, and conduit benders, and head out to my 2011 Ford F-150, the one with the scratch on the passenger door that I never fixed, the one my daughter once said was embarrassing to be seen in. I'm a licensed master electrician, have been since 1987. I've rewired hospital wings. I've installed systems in buildings taller than anything in our county. I've kept the lights on for thousands of people who never knew my name. And to my family, I was just the man who came home smelling like work. Let me tell you about 3 moments that should have told me everything. The first was at Sandra's company Christmas party 4 years ago. She introduced me to her boss, a man named Gregory. Nice suit, firm handshake. "This is Eugene," Sandra said. Her voice got that apologetic tone I'd heard 100 times before. "He works with his hands." Gregory nodded politely and moved on within 30 seconds. I stood there holding a glass of cheap wine, wearing the only sport coat I owned. The second moment was smaller, but cut deeper. Sandra and I were going to dinner for our anniversary. 35 years together. I pulled the truck up to the house, ready to open her door like I always did. She looked at my F-150 and sighed heavily. "Can we take my car instead? I don't want people at the restaurant to think..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The third moment came from Sandra's own mouth, when she thought I couldn't hear. I'd come home early, rare for me. She was on the phone with her friend Darlene, sitting in the kitchen. I was in the garage, putting away my tools. The door was cracked open. "I love him, Darlene. I do. But sometimes I wonder what life would be like with someone ambitious. Someone who wanted more than just this. This. 38 years of this. Mortgage paid off in 18 years. Both kids through college with 0 student debt. Retirement account sitting at $127,000. A life built one electrical wire at a time. This. But it wasn't just Sandra who saw me that way. Kyle, my son, 34 years old now, marketing manager at some firm downtown, makes $78,000 a year. I know because he mentioned it at Thanksgiving dinner, like it was a revelation. When Kyle got promoted last spring, he threw a celebration dinner. His mother was invited, his sister was invited, his girlfriend's parents were invited. I found out about it 2 weeks after it happened. "It was a corporate thing, Dad," he said when I finally asked. "You wouldn't have fit in." Then there's Brittany, 31, interior designer, posts constantly on Instagram about being a self-made woman following her passion. Every Mother's Day, she writes a long post about Sandra. "To my amazing self-made mom who taught me what strength looks like." Father's Day, 4 years running now, nothing. Not a post, not a phone call, not even a text until the day was almost over. But the moment that changed everything, the one I keep coming back to, happened 2 years ago at a family dinner. We were talking about careers. Kyle was bragging about some campaign he'd led. Sandra was glowing with pride. Brittany was nodding along enthusiastically. Then Kyle looked directly at me and said, "Dad, no offense, but you've never really built anything. You just fix things. That's different." The table went quiet for a second. Then Sandra changed the subject like nothing happened. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, just finished my meal and excused myself to the garage. That night I sat alone in the darkness. On the wall behind my workbench hangs a frame. Inside it is a piece of paper I look at every single day. It's my first business license, dated 1992. Hollister Electrical Contractors, Incorporated, 52 employees, $4.8 million in annual revenue, contracts with 2 hospitals and a state university. My son said I never built anything. That night, sitting in that garage, I made a decision. Not about the company, not about the money, about something far more important. But I'll get to that. Here's what I knew by the summer of last year. Sandra was hiding something. The late nights at the office that started 2 years before. The phone she suddenly started keeping face down on every surface. The business trips to cities where her company had no clients and no offices. I'm not a suspicious man by nature. 38 years of marriage will teach you to trust. But I'm also not a fool. I could have confronted her right then, asked her directly, demanded answers and explanations. But a man who spent 38 years troubleshooting electrical systems knows one fundamental thing. You don't flip the breaker until you've traced every single wire. So I made a phone call to someone who finds things for a living. Before I tell you what she found, let me explain what was at stake. Ohio is an equitable distribution state. That means in a divorce, assets get divided fairly, which usually means close to 50-50. If Sandra filed for divorce without any complications, here's what she could claim. Half of our house, valued at $385,000. Half of my retirement account, $127,000. Half of our joint savings, $89,000. Her lawyer, and yes, I'd later discover she already had one, advised her to target $300,000 minimum. In Sandra's mind, that was everything I had. Here's what she didn't know. Hollister Electrical Contractors was started in 1992, 6 years after our wedding. Under the prenup we signed in 1986, the one her own father insisted on, any business started by either party remains the sole property of that party. My company isn't a marital asset. It's mine alone. Current value of Hollister Electrical, $4.8 million. My personal accounts, completely separate from joint funds, $412,000. Brokerage account, $318,000. Total net worth that Sandra knew absolutely nothing about, roughly $5.5 million. But here's the thing. I wasn't scared of losing money. I had plenty of it. What scared me was something else entirely. I was scared that my children would go through their entire lives believing I was worthless, that Sandra would win the narrative, the poor woman who finally escaped her simple, unambitious husband, that 38 years of work would be reduced to nothing but a punchline, that I would lose not my assets but my truth, my dignity, my story. See, money comes and goes. I've learned that over the years. But once people decide who you are, that story sticks forever. And my family had written a story about me that wasn't true. Sandra's story, the martyr who stayed too long with a man beneath her. Kyle's story, the son embarrassed by a father who never built anything meaningful. Brittany's story, the daughter of a woman who deserved so much better. I let them write those stories because I never corrected them. I stayed quiet. I thought my actions would speak loud enough. They didn't. So when I made that phone call in July of last year, I wasn't looking for ammunition. I was looking for the truth, and I was willing to wait for the perfect moment to reveal it. Angela Simmons, licensed private investigator, 14 years of experience, discreet, thorough, expensive, $400 a day plus expenses, worth every single penny. What she found over the next 14 months would change everything, but not in the way you might expect. Angela's first report arrived in October, 3 months after I hired her. I remember the day clearly. A Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my truck outside a job site. a rewiring project at Lincoln Elementary School. Angela had sent the file digitally, but she also mailed me a hard copy, said I might want something physical to hold on to. She was right about that. 58 pages, 73 photographs, 12 audio recordings. The summary on page 1 was clinical, almost sterile in its precision. Subject: Sandra Hollister, age 59, extramarital relationship confirmed. Duration: approximately 5 years. Partner: Graham Ashford, age 58, CFO at Regional Atlantic Insurance. 5 years. While I was waking up at 5:30 every morning, while I was coming home with aching joints and calloused hands, while I was putting money into accounts she had full access to. 5 years. The details came next, page after page. They met every Thursday at the downtown Marriott, room 412. I still remember that number. $189 a night, charged to Sandra's credit card, the one linked to our joint account. Angela had dates, times, photographs of them entering the hotel, photographs of them leaving, sometimes 4 hours later, sometimes the next morning. There was a trip to Cancun in February. Sandra told me it was a work conference. Angela pulled the flight records. 2 tickets, side by side. Row 12, seats A and B, Sandra Hollister and Graham Ashford. Then I followed the money. That's where it got worse. Over the past 3 years, Sandra had transferred $178,000 from our joint savings account, money I had earned, into a down payment. For a condominium, in Graham Ashford's name. She bought her boyfriend a home with my money. That wasn't all. There were gifts. A Rolex Submariner, $12,500, custom-tailored suits, weekend getaways to wine country, a Louis Vuitton Neverfull bag that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined. Total amount I could trace directly to Graham. $209,000. $209,000 of my life spent on a man who was sleeping with my wife. But none of that was the worst part. The worst part came when Angela dug into Sandra's phone records, text messages, recovered from a cloud backup that Sandra forgot she was still logged into on our home computer. One was from Kyle, my son, dated March of last year. "Graham seems great, Mom. Way better than Dad ever was. You deserve this." My son wrote that about the man sleeping with his mother. Another was from Brittany. "Debutcon. I met Graham last weekend. He's so sophisticated. Dad could never." My daughter wrote that. I read those messages sitting alone in my truck, parked outside that elementary school. 38 years of marriage, college funds paid in full, a mortgage I killed myself to pay off early. Every sacrifice I ever made for those kids. And they had met the man sleeping with my wife. Called him sophisticated, said he was better than Dad. I sat there for a very long time. Engine off, windows up, just me and the silence and those words on the screen. Here's what most people don't understand about betrayal. It's not one thing, it's layers. You think you've found the bottom and then the floor drops out again. But Angela wasn't finished. I had asked her to dig deeper, to find out who Graham Ashford really was. If my wife was going to blow up our entire family for this man, I wanted to know exactly who he was. What she found almost made me laugh out loud. Graham Ashford, Chief Financial Officer, impressive title, nice suits, expensive haircut. The kind of man who orders wine by pointing at the list instead of saying the name. Also, divorced twice before. 2 adult children who haven't spoken to him in 4 years. Child support arrears totaling $38,000. And an IRS lien, $89,000 in unpaid back taxes. His salary was $245,000 a year. Looks impressive on paper, but he was spending closer to $300,000. Living in a condo he couldn't afford, the same condo my wife's money paid for. Angela put it plainly in her report. "Mr. Hollister, your wife isn't being seduced by a wealthy man. She's funding one." Sandra thought she'd found an upgrade, a sophisticated man who could give her the life she deserved. She found a con artist with good hair and an empty bank account. I had everything I needed now. Dates, photos, bank records, it's enough to destroy Sandra in any courtroom in the state of Ohio. But I didn't want a courtroom. Not yet. Courtrooms are public, sure, but they're also cold, clinical. People sit in rows and listen to lawyers argue over percentages. I wanted something different. Something that would make them understand, all of them, exactly what they had done, and exactly who they had done it to. For that, I needed to wait, for the perfect moment. And then, 8 months later, Sandra handed me exactly what I needed. She came home one evening, smiling wider than she had in years. "Eugene, the kids and I have been talking. We want to throw you a retirement party. Invite everyone. Your co-workers, the neighbors, our families, a real celebration." I looked at her carefully, at that smile, at the phone she was still clutching in her hand. I knew what this really was. My children had told me I never built anything. My wife was sleeping with another man, and now they wanted to gather an audience. For what? I wasn't certain yet. But I had a guess. I smiled back at her. "That sounds perfect, Sandra. Let's invite everyone who matters." She thought she was setting the stage. She didn't realize I was the one directing the entire show. Let me tell you about a piece of paper that's been sitting in a safe deposit box for 38 years. In 1986, 2 weeks before our wedding, Sandra's father sat me down in his living room. His name was Donald, successful insurance salesman, nice house in the suburbs. He looked at me like I was something the dog dragged in. "Eugene," he said, "my daughter is making a mistake marrying you, but she loves you, so I'm going to let this happen, on one condition." He slid a document across the coffee table, a prenuptial agreement. "I want to protect my daughter," he said, "from men like you." Men like me. Blue-collar men. Men with dirt under their fingernails. Men who worked with their hands instead of their heads. I read the document carefully. Every single clause. Every paragraph. Sandra was watching from the doorway. She looked embarrassed. "Daddy, this isn't necessary." "It's completely necessary," Donald said firmly. I picked up the pen, but before I signed, I asked one question. Clause 7. The infidelity clause. This applies to both parties, correct? Donald barely looked at me. "Of course it does. It applies to whoever breaks the marriage vows." I nodded, signed my name, handed the pen to Sandra. She signed too, quickly, without reading a single word. Clause 7 stated, in clear legal language, in the event of proven infidelity, the offending party forfeits all claims to spousal support and shall receive no more than 25% of marital assets. In 1986, Sandra thought that clause was there to protect her. From me, the working-class man who might stray. In 2024, that clause was still there, and Sandra had never once thought to check whose name it would actually apply to. There was another clause too, Clause 4. Any business started by either party during the marriage shall remain the sole property of that party. Donald included that one because he was planning to start his own insurance agency. Wanted to make sure I couldn't touch it if Sandra and I ever split up. He never imagined his son-in-law would be the one building something worth protecting. Hollister Electrical Contractors started in 1992, currently employing 52 people, holding contracts with St. Catherine's Hospital, Riverside Medical Center, and State College's new campus expansion. Last year's revenue, $4.8 million. Profit margin, 18%. Under that prenup, Donald insisted on, every single penny of that company belongs to me. The week before the retirement party, I sat down with Leonard Croft. Leonard and I went to high school together, played football on the same team. He became a family law attorney, 28 years of experience. We'd stayed in touch over the decades, fishing trips, occasional poker games. He was the first person I called after Angela's report arrived. We met in his office downtown. He had the prenup spread out on his desk. "Gene," he said, shaking his head slowly, "you've got a slam dunk here. Prenup, infidelity, financial fraud. She gets the minimum, 25% of marital assets, 0 spousal support. Your company's completely untouchable." I nodded. "So what do you want? A quick filing? I can have papers drawn up by Monday morning." I thought about it. Thought about Sandra's smile when she proposed the party. Thought about Kyle's text message. Thought about Brittany's Instagram posts. "No, I said. I don't want a courtroom. Not yet. Leonard raised an eyebrow. Then what exactly do you want? I want them to understand. All of them. Not just Sandra. The kids, too. I want them to hear the truth. To see it. To realize what they did and who they did it to. Leonard leaned back in his chair. You want an audience. I want the truth told in front of everyone who matters. Leonard was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Jean, I've been a lawyer for almost 3 decades. I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anyone hold cards like the ones you're holding. I stood up, shook his hand. Leonard, I'd like you to come to my retirement party as a guest. He understood exactly what I meant. September 14th, a Saturday, 3:47 in the afternoon, the VFW Hall in Dayton, Ohio. $350 to rent for the entire day. Same hall where my father had his retirement party 31 years ago. I chose it for exactly that reason. 85 guests filled the room. My employees, all 52 of them, had been invited, though Sandra had no idea what that actually meant. Sandra's co-workers from the insurance company, neighbors we'd known for decades, extended family from both sides. A banner hung over the buffet table. Happy retirement, Jean. The food was modest, $12 a person, trays of sandwiches, pasta salad, a sheet cake with white frosting. Sandra had complained it wasn't elegant enough for the occasion. I told her it was fine. I stood near the entrance, shaking hands, accepting congratulations from people who thought this was just a simple party. Some of them were my guys from the company. Ronnie Watts, my foreman of 29 years, gave me a bear hug and whispered in my ear, "Whatever happens today, boss, we've got your back." I nodded at him. He knew something was coming. All my employees did. They knew who I really was, what I'd actually built, and they knew Sandra had absolutely no idea. Leonard Croft arrived in a gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Sandra greeted him politely, assuming he was just another guest from my past. My sister Phyllis stood in the corner near the exit, watching everything with sharp eyes. She was the only family member who knew the whole truth, had known for years, kept my secret because I asked her to. At 3:30, Kyle took the microphone. "Hey everyone, thanks for coming out to celebrate Dad's retirement." He paused dramatically, looked at Sandra. She gave him an encouraging nod. "Dad, you've worked hard your whole life. We appreciate the little things you did." The little things. Scattered applause from the confused guests. Then Brittany took the microphone from her brother. "Mom basically raised us while Dad was out working all the time, but he was around. So thanks for that, Dad." A few awkward laughs rippled through the room. I saw Ronnie's jaw tighten visibly. Then Sandra walked to the front of the room. She was wearing a new dress, navy blue with gold buttons. Probably expensive, probably bought with money from our joint account. She took the microphone and smiled warmly at the crowd. "Eugene, we've been married 38 years. You've been reliable, steady, like that old truck of yours sitting in the parking lot." Laughter from some of the guests who knew the truck. My F-150, the one she always hated. "But I've realized something these past few years," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Life is short, and I deserve to actually live it." The room got noticeably quieter. Sandra reached into her designer purse, pulled out a manila envelope, larger than the one that had been sitting by the cake. This one she'd been holding on to all afternoon. "These are divorce papers, Eugene. I've already signed them. It's time for both of us to move on to better things." She handed me the envelope with a flourish. Kyle started clapping again, loud, deliberate claps that echoed off the walls. Brittany joined in enthusiastically. A few confused guests followed along, clearly not sure what else to do in the moment. Sandra raised her chin proudly. "I've found someone who actually sees me, who values me, who can give me the life I've always deserved." She didn't say Graham's name out loud, but I saw her glance toward the door like she expected him to walk in triumphantly. He didn't. He was too smart for that, or too cowardly. The room was frozen solid. Some guests were staring at the floor. Others were watching me with wide eyes. I didn't speak for 5 seconds. 6, 7. Sandra's confident smile began to falter. Eugene, aren't you going to say anything? I looked down at the envelope in my hands, opened it slowly and deliberately, pulled out the papers inside. Petition for divorce. Grounds, irreconcilable differences. Settlement demand, $300,000, primary residence, 50% of all retirement accounts. I read every single word carefully. Then I looked up at my wife. May I respond to this? Sandra crossed her arms defensively. That's what the lawyers are for, Eugene. I'd like to respond now, in front of everyone here, since you chose to do this in front of everyone. Kyle stepped forward quickly. Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to. Sit down, Kyle. He stopped mid-step. I'd never spoken to him like that before, not once in 34 years of his life. I looked at Sandra, at my children, at the 85 people who had just witnessed my wife try to publicly humiliate me at my own retirement party. Then I asked one simple question. Sandra, Kyle, Brittany, I want the three of you to answer me honestly, in front of everyone here. They waited, shifting uncomfortably. In 38 years of marriage, did any of you ever once ask what I actually do for a living? Not what you assumed, what I actually do. Sandra blinked rapidly. You're an electrician, Eugene. You've always been an electrician. Did you ever ask who I work for? Who signs my paychecks? How many people I actually employ? Kyle was shifting his weight nervously. Dad, what are you talking about? It's a simple question. Did any of you ever ask? The silence stretched out painfully. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Brittany's voice came out small and uncertain. You work for a company. An electrical company somewhere. Which company? What's the name? She couldn't answer. I turned slowly to face the room, found Ronnie standing near the back wall, arms crossed over his chest, grinning from ear to ear. Ronnie, how long have you worked for me? His voice carried clearly across the hall. 29 years, boss. Sandra's face went completely pale. And how many other people work for me, Ronnie? 52 as of last month. 53 if you count the new apprentice who started Monday. I looked back at Sandra, at Kyle, at Brittany, at every single person in that room who had bought the story of Eugene, the simple electrician. I didn't work for a company, I said calmly. I built one. The silence was absolute. Hollister Electrical Contractors Incorporated, founded in 1992. 52 full-time employees. Contracts with St. Catherine's Hospital, Riverside Medical Center, and State College. Last year's revenue, $4.8 million. Sandra's mouth fell open. No sound came out. Kyle whispered hoarsely, That's not possible. Brittany was already crying. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a manila folder of my own, older, more worn, the color of aged paper. Now, I said quietly, let me tell you what else you didn't know. I held up the worn folder so everyone in the room could see it clearly. Sandra, do you remember this document? She didn't respond. She was still trying to process the company revelation. 1986, 2 weeks before our wedding, your father made us sign this in his living room. You were so certain I'd cheat on you someday, that I'd embarrass you, that you'd need protection from a man like me. I opened the folder deliberately, pulled out the prenuptial agreement, its pages yellowed with age. Clause 7. I'll read it out loud so everyone here can hear exactly what it says. My voice was steady, calm. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head for 14 months. In the event of proven infidelity, the offending party forfeits all claims to spousal support and shall receive no more than 25% of marital assets. I looked directly at Sandra. Your father wanted that clause in there to protect you. From me, the working-class man who might stray. Sandra's voice cracked badly. Eugene, I don't understand, but it works both ways, Sandra. Your father was very clear about that when I asked him. I pulled out a second folder. This one was newer, much thicker. Angela Simmons, licensed private investigator, 58 pages, 73 photographs, 12 audio recordings. Sandra took an involuntary step backward. 5 years, Sandra. 5 years with Graham Ashford. Room 412 at the downtown Marriott. Every single Thursday, $189 a night, charged to our joint account. The room had gone completely silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit. The birthday trip to Cancun that you told me was a work conference. 2 plane tickets, side by side in row 12, you and Graham. Kyle had gone white as a sheet. The Rolex Submariner you bought him for Christmas. $12,500 from our joint savings account. I pulled out a photograph from the folder, held it up for everyone to see. The condominium in his name, the one you made the down payment on, $178,000, my money, for his home. Sandra's legs gave out. She grabbed a nearby chair to keep from falling. In total, $209,000 transferred from accounts I funded to a man who was sleeping with my wife for 5 years. Brittany was sobbing openly now. Daddy, we didn't know about the money, but... You didn't know about the money, I agreed. But you knew about Graham. I pulled out printed sheets, screenshots from the cloud backup. Text message from Kyle to Sandra, March of last year, and I quote, Graham seems great, Mom. Way better than Dad ever was. Kyle's face went from white to a sickly green. Text message from Brittany to Sandra, June. I met Graham last weekend. He's so sophisticated. Dad could never. Brittany covered her face with both hands. You knew, both of you. You knew your mother was sleeping with another man for years, and you encouraged her. Called him better than me. Called him sophisticated. The man who paid for your education, your first cars, your apartment deposits when you couldn't make rent. Better than me. I set the papers down on the nearest table. But here's what's truly interesting. I ran a complete background check on Graham Ashford, since Sandra seemed so convinced he was an upgrade from her simple electrician husband. I turned to address the entire crowd. Some people were frozen in place. Others were leaning forward, captivated. Graham Ashford, CFO at Regional Atlantic Insurance. Impressive title. Nice suits. But here's what his title doesn't tell you. Divorced twice before. His 2 adult children haven't spoken to him in over 4 years. He owes $38,000 in back child support. And the IRS has an active lien on him for $89,000 in unpaid taxes. Sandra looked up sharply. That's not true. His salary is $245,000 a year. His spending is closer to $300,000. The condominium he lives in, he couldn't afford the down payment. That's why you paid for it with my money. I paused deliberately. Let the mathematics settle into everyone's minds. You weren't being rescued by a wealthy man, Sandra. You were funding a con artist who needed your money more than he ever needed you. Someone in the crowd, I think it was one of Sandra's co-workers from the insurance company, let out a sound that was half gasp, half bitter laugh. Sandra was crying now, real tears that smeared her mascara down her cheeks. Eugene, please, let me explain what happened. Explain what exactly? The 5-year affair? The $209,000? The way you talked about me to your boyfriend? To our own children? I picked up the divorce papers she'd handed me with such confidence. You want a divorce, Sandra? You've got one, but not on these terms. I tore the papers in half, let them flutter to the floor. My lawyer will be filing counterpapers first thing Monday morning. Leonard? Leonard Croft stepped forward from the crowd. Sandra finally realized who he actually was. Mrs. Hollister, Leonard said professionally, I represent Eugene in this matter. Our counter-petition will cite adultery and financial fraud as grounds. Under your prenuptial agreement, you forfeit all spousal support. You're entitled to 25% of marital assets, not business assets, which are your husband's sole property under Clause 4. Sandra's voice was barely a whisper now. How much is 25%? Approximately $152,000, plus your personal belongings and your vehicle. Sandra looked at me with dawning horror, at the company employees who were now murmuring among themselves, at the life she thought she had completely understood. You're worth millions of dollars? $5.5 million, roughly, not counting future business growth or appreciation. She collapsed fully into the chair. Kyle stood frozen like a statue. Brittany had sunk to the floor, still crying. A voice came from the back of the room, one of Sandra's co-workers from accounting. Sandra, you left a millionaire for a guy who owes the IRS $89,000? No one laughed. But the silence that followed was somehow worse. I addressed the room one final time. I want to be absolutely clear about something. This isn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. This is consequence. I looked at my family, at the 3 people I had loved more than anything else in my life. When you betray someone for 38 years and then try to humiliate them publicly at their own retirement party, you don't get to claim victim status when the truth finally comes out. I'm not taking anything that isn't legally mine. I'm simply no longer subsidizing people who despise me. I picked up my jacket from the back of a chair. Leonard, I'll sign whatever needs signing on Monday. Ronnie? Ronnie stepped forward proudly. 29 years of loyalty. You're getting a raise. 10%. Effective immediately. Ronnie nodded firmly. Thank you, boss. I walked toward the exit. My sister Phyllis fell into step beside me without a word. At the door, I stopped, turned back one last time. Sandra was still slumped in the chair, face buried in her hands. Kyle was trying unsuccessfully to help her stand. Brittany hadn't moved from the floor. Sandra? She looked up at me with ruined makeup and devastated eyes. I let the silence hang for one more moment. Happy retirement. Then I walked out into the September afternoon and didn't look back. The next 72 hours were complete chaos. For them, for me, it was just paperwork. Monday morning at 9 sharp, Leonard filed the counterpetition at the Franklin County Courthouse. Divorce on grounds of adultery. Civil claim for financial fraud. Seeking recovery of the $209,000 transferred to Graham Ashford without my knowledge or consent. Sandra's attorney called Leonard by noon that same day. The conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes. Your client is welcome to contest this, Leonard told him calmly. We have photographs, bank records, timestamps, and 12 audio recordings. How long exactly do you want to drag this out? They didn't contest a single point. Kyle showed up at my sister's house that Tuesday evening. Phyllis had let me stay in her guest room while the divorce paperwork processed. He found me sitting on the back porch, drinking black coffee and watching the sunset. Dad, his voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying for days. Can we talk? I nodded at the empty chair beside me. He sat down heavily. For a long minute, neither of us said anything at all. I didn't know, he finally said, about the company, about any of it. I know you didn't. Why didn't you ever tell us? I took a slow sip of coffee, thought carefully about how to answer, because I wanted you to respect me for who I was, not for what I was worth in dollars. Kyle flinched visibly. I wanted my children to see their father as a man who worked hard, kept his word, and built something meaningful with his hands. I wanted you to be proud of that, not proud of a number in a bank account. Dad, I'm proud of you. Kyle, you told me I never built anything at dinner, in front of the whole family. You said those exact words to my face. He had no response to that. You texted your mother that her boyfriend was better than Dad. You knew she was having an affair, and you actively encouraged it. I didn't think about it that way. No, you didn't think at all. I let that statement sit in the air between us. I'm not angry with you, Kyle. I'm disappointed. There's an important difference between those two things. Anger fades with time. Disappointment takes much longer. He was crying now, 34 years old and crying like he was 10 again. What do I do, Dad? How do I make this right? I looked at him for a long time before responding. You can start by telling me what you did wrong. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I didn't know. Tell me specifically what you did wrong. He opened his mouth to speak, closed it again, opened it once more. Nothing coherent came out. That's what I thought. When you can actually answer that question, call me. He left without saying another word. Brittany came 3 days later. She brought a letter with her. 8 pages, handwritten in blue ink. I read it that night after she left. Twice through, carefully. She didn't make any excuses. Didn't blame Sandra for manipulating her. Didn't claim she didn't know what she was doing. She listed everything. Every Instagram post that deliberately excluded me. Every time she'd automatically sided with Sandra. Every text message to her mother about Graham and how sophisticated he was. At the end of the letter, she wrote, I don't expect you to forgive me, Dad. I just needed you to know that I finally see what I did, and I'm deeply ashamed. I called her the next afternoon. We met for coffee at a diner outside of town where nobody would recognize us. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in a week. "I read your letter," I said simply. "And?" "You're the only one who actually did the work, who took real responsibility. That matters to me." She started crying quietly. I let her. "I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine between us," I said, "but I'm willing to try rebuilding, slowly, one step at a time." She nodded through her tears. "I can do slow." We sat there for over an hour. Didn't talk about Sandra or Kyle or Graham or any of it. Just talked. About her interior design work, about the cabin I was thinking of buying up on Lake Erie, about the weather changing. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Sandra tried to contact me exactly once after everything. A voicemail, 2 weeks after the party. "Eugene, please, I made a terrible mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake. But 38 years of marriage, doesn't that count for something? Please call me back." I listened to it one time through. Then I deleted it permanently. Some debts simply can't be repaid, and some ledgers need to be permanently closed. The divorce was finalized in December, 3 months after the party. Sandra received exactly $152,000, 25% of marital assets, precisely as the prenup specified. She also got her 2016 Honda Accord and all her personal belongings. She lost the house, which I had purchased back in 1985, a full year before we were married. My name alone on the original deed, my premarital asset. She lost all spousal support, completely forfeited under the infidelity clause her own father had insisted on including 38 years ago. She lost her reputation. Within a week of that retirement party, the story had spread through every neighborhood, every workplace, every social circle we'd ever been part of. The wife who cheated, the mother who lied to her own children, the woman who threw away a millionaire for a man who owed the IRS. Last I heard from mutual acquaintances, Sandra is renting a one-bedroom apartment across town. $1,100 a month, utilities not included. She still works at the insurance company, but her co-workers don't look at her the same way anymore. She texts me once a month, every month like clockwork. I haven't responded once. Graham Ashford fared considerably worse. Leonard filed a civil suit against him within 30 days of the divorce filing. The money Sandra had transferred, the down payment, the gifts, the trips, technically came from a marital account that I had primarily funded. Under Ohio law, that made Graham legally liable for accepting funds fraudulently diverted from a marriage. We recovered $168,000 of the $209,000. The remaining $41,000 had already been spent and was unrecoverable. Then the IRS moved in on him. They'd apparently been watching Graham for years, waiting for a good excuse to act. Our lawsuit and the publicity surrounding it gave them exactly the opening they needed. Last I heard, they're garnishing 25% of whatever salary he earns until the $89,000 is paid in full. The State Board of Insurance also opened a formal ethics investigation, something about professional conduct violations, having an undisclosed relationship with someone whose spouse's company had potentially done business with his firm. Graham lost his CFO position in March. His LinkedIn profile now says open to opportunities. It's been saying that for 8 months. Sandra finally confronted him directly about 2 months after the party. Demanded to know why he'd hidden his massive debts, his tax problems, his 2 failed marriages. He dumped her that same week, said she was too much drama and not worth the hassle anymore. And the woman who left a millionaire for an upgrade found herself alone, nearly broke, and dumped by the man she'd sacrificed her entire marriage for. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim satisfaction when I first heard that news, but the feeling only lasted a moment. Then it just felt sad and pathetic. Kyle is still struggling to find his footing. I've seen him twice since that porch conversation. Both times he came expecting easy reconciliation. Both times I asked him the same question. What specifically did you do wrong? Both times he couldn't really answer. He'd say vague things like, I should have been more supportive, or I should have asked more questions about your life. generic phrases. Nothing that showed he actually understood the depth of what he'd done. The trust fund I'd quietly set up for him over the years, $95,000 meant for his future, remains completely frozen. He'll get access to it when he earns it, not a day before. He still owes $42,000 in student loans, pays them entirely by himself now. Calls me every few months to check in. I answer the phone sometimes, when I feel like it. Brittany has taken a different path. She's the only one who did the actual work of taking responsibility. After our initial coffee meeting, she cut off contact with Sandra entirely, completely. Said she couldn't maintain a relationship with both of us given what happened, and she'd made her choice. We have dinner together once a month now. She drives up to the lake house. We cook together, something we never once did when she was growing up. She asks about the company, about my employees, about whatever project I'm currently working on. She's genuinely interested. For the first time in her 31 years of life, she's actually interested in who her father really is. I reinstated part of her trust fund, $50,000 with specific conditions attached. She has to maintain regular contact, has to keep building her interior design business seriously, has to continue the therapy she started on her own after the party. It's not the same relationship we had before. It's actually better, because now it's built on honesty instead of assumptions. As for me, I sold the family house in February. Too many memories in those walls. Not all of them bad, but enough of them painful. I bought a cabin on Lake Erie instead. 3 bedrooms, a private dock, more space than I'll ever need. Quiet, peaceful, the kind of place I'd dreamed about for decades, but never thought I deserved to have. The company is still running strong. I go in 3 days a week now instead of 6. Ronnie handles most of the day-to-day operations these days. He's more than earned that responsibility. I gave all 52 employees a bonus in January, 10% of their annual salary across the board. Called it a loyalty bonus, because loyalty actually matters to me. I'm 62 years old. I could retire tomorrow and never work another day in my life. But I genuinely like what I do. I like solving complex problems. I like building things that last. That hasn't changed one bit. What's changed is that I no longer hide any of it. People ask me sometimes if I regret how everything ended. The answer is complicated. I don't regret exposing the truth to everyone. I don't regret standing up for myself after 38 years. I don't regret the moment Sandra finally realized she'd thrown away something she never bothered to understand. But I do regret the 38 years I spent in silence. The decades I let them write a false story about me. The countless moments I could have spoken up and chose not to. I told myself that silence was strength, that providing without complaining was nobility, that if I just kept working, kept earning, kept sacrificing, they would eventually see my worth. They never did, not until I showed them. Here's what I've learned. Silence isn't strength when it allows people to erase you completely. You can be humble without becoming invisible. You can be generous without becoming a doormat. A boundary isn't a punishment. It's clarity. It's telling the people in your life, this is where I end and you begin. This is what I will accept from you. This is what I won't. For 38 years, I had no real boundaries. I let Sandra diminish me publicly. Let Kyle dismiss me casually. Let Brittany ignore me completely. Because I thought that's what love required. Endless endurance. It doesn't. Love requires respect, and respect has to flow both directions. If someone refuses to see your value, no amount of sacrifice will ever open their eyes. Some of you watching this might recognize yourselves in my story. Maybe you're the one who's been dismissed, who works hard and gives everything and still gets treated like part of the furniture, who stays quiet because you think silence keeps the peace. It doesn't. Silence just makes it easier for them to forget you exist. Speak up, not with anger, not with revenge in your heart, just with truth. Tell people who you actually are. Show them what you've actually built. And if they still refuse to see it, walk away with your dignity intact. Some people don't want to understand. They just want to use. Or maybe you recognize yourself in Sandra, in Kyle, in Brittany. Maybe there's someone in your own life you've been taking for granted, someone you've dismissed because they don't match your definition of success, someone whose real value you've never bothered to discover. Ask yourself honestly, what don't I know about this person? What assumptions have I made without evidence? And what would it cost me to actually pay attention? You might be genuinely surprised by what you find. I'm Eugene Hollister. I'm 62 years old. I'm an electrician. I'm a business owner. I'm a father, still despite everything that happened. And I'm finally, after 38 years of silence, exactly who I always was. Just no longer afraid to show it. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you have a story of your own, about boundaries, about family, about finally being seen for who you really are, I'd like to hear it. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, the people who matter will ask. The ones who don't, won't. That tells you everything you need to know about them.